didn't write more, did you?
A little bit.
Okay.
It's acknowledgement. Everything about you is just for this.
Okay.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here and taking the time to attend the talk. My name is Dr. Jose Fernandez. I'm an associate professor in the Latinx Studies and at the American Studies Department at the University of Iowa. Before we start, I want to thank the University Libraries, the Department of American Studies, and the Iowa City Public Library for sponsoring this event. I also would like to thank Dr. Renee Rocha, Chair of American Studies Department, and especially Dr. Janet Weaver, the curator of the Iowa Women's Archive at the university, for their support and their work behind the scenes while making this event possible. Please note that this presentation will be recorded. Also, after the presentation, we will have at least 15 to 20 minutes for questions from the audience. Now, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our guest speaker. Dr. Cynthia E. Orozco is the National League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC historian, and a professor emeritus of History and Humanities at Eastern New Mexico University in Ruidoso. She earned her BA at the University of Texas in Austin and her PhD at UCLA. She's the author of No Mexican Women or Dogs Allowed, The Rise of the Mexican-American Civil Rights Movement, A History of the Origins of LULAC, and the best-selling University of Texas Press academic book between 2010 and 2020. Some of her other books include Agent of Change, Adela's Los Bento, Mexican-American Civil Rights Activist and Texas Feminist, A History of a LULAC Ally, and winner of the Liz Carpenter Award for Research in the History of Women from the Texas State Historical Association. She's also the author of Pioneer of Mexican-American Civil Rights, Alonso S. Perales, a biography of the principal founder of LULAC. Dr. Orozco has written over 100 op-eds and letters to the editor and almost 100 encyclopedia articles. She has received 2 Ford Foundation fellowships, and in 2023, she was named a National Association for Chicana and Chicano Studies Scholar. The title of her presentation is Iowa in the History of National LULAC. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Cynthia Orozco.
Thank you, Dr. Fernandez. It's very much a pleasure to be here with you tonight. It's my very first visit to Iowa, and I love it already. I love the peaceful and quiet nature. Even in this city compared to other cities, I love Iowa City already. And I should really say the main reason that I'm here is to visit the Iowa Women's Archives here at your university here, the University of Iowa. And what I encountered or discovered maybe a few years ago was that Iowa has, I believe, the second best LULAC history collection in the country. Visiting yesterday and today, I'm very impressed with the work that has been done here at the Iowa Women's Archives. And I understand that the Mujeres Latinas project back in 2005 or so probably was the first project about the Latino community. And since then, the LULAC records of the state of Iowa have also been a priority for the Iowa archives here. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I know about Iowa, and I actually know very little. That's why I'm here. And I've only had 1 day and a half in the archives. But fortunately, we have other people who are really the true experts of LULAC in Iowa at this point, and that would be with us Dr. Janet Weaver. If Dr. Weaver, if you would please stand up. In case you folks don't know her, she really is the true expert today. But before I talk about LULAC and in Iowa, I want to talk a little bit about myself so you know why I'm here and what I do. So I am the official National LULAC Historian. I am the second person to hold that position. But unofficially, I have been the National LULAC Historian since I was 20 years old in 1978. And in 2028, I will celebrate 50 years of studying, researching, and writing about the history of LULAC. Thank you. So I should first say that I'm from a little town called Cuero, Texas, which is a little bit southeast of San Antonio. And I am the daughter of a woman, Aurora Orozco, who was a member of LULAC in the 1970s. Here you see a picture of my mother. She's the secretary. She's the third from the left in the back. And this is what we call a mixed gender council, men and women. Because as some of you may know, in 1929, when LULAC was formed in Corpus Christi, Texas, there were only men that were permitted or allowed. And over time, we see first, very briefly, a period of ladies' auxiliaries, and then after 1933, we see ladies' LULAC, which are separate councils for women. By the 1950s and definitely into the 70s, we see mixed gender councils, and this would have been one of them. I was fortunate to be born right at the right time when Pell Grants were available, student financial aid. We had the women's movement. We had the Chicano movement. And fortunately, my mother was a 1937 high school graduate, which would have made her really an educational elite in the Mexican descent community at the time. So my mother valued education, and again, all things came together so that eventually I was at the University of Texas at Austin. Luckily, I had a wonderful professor when I was a sophomore who said, okay, students, everybody, you have to write a 20-page original paper with original sources. So get into the archives and go see what you can find. You choose your own topic. So I chose LULAC as my topic. And so I wrote a 20 or 30-page paper with probably over 100 footnotes. From that point on, I've been a nerd in the LULAC archives, and that's what I do. And I had a wonderful professor who said there's only two places in the late 1970s where you can study Mexican-American history where it would be respected and you would have support, and that would be UCLA and Stanford. So not even at the University of Texas at Austin was there yet the kind of support that you really should have when you're entering a doctoral program. So I went on to UCLA, and I was there a long time, but I did leave UCLA finally in the late 80s to go on to write my dissertation on the origins of LULAC, but I had to go to UT Austin. When I wrote my senior honors thesis at UT Austin at 79, 80, there was zero LULAC archives. There was nothing called a LULAC archive. But LULAC was already celebrating its 50th anniversary in 1979. And imagine that you have an English-speaking, middle-class, professional organization, major accomplishments, and 50 years later, there's still nothing in the archives. So the LULAC president at the time helped to create an official archive there, and now the LULAC archive is so extensive in Austin that it is the equivalent of a football field of paper standing up. It's massive. Okay, nonetheless, there's major gaps. And again, why I'm here in Iowa is to fill some of those gaps, especially related to the Midwest. So anyway, from 1979 on, I have been attending LULAC events, national conventions, state conventions, et cetera. This is a 1982 photo. This is me talking to then National President Jose Garcia de Lara in San Antonio at a national convention. I was already receiving awards before I had done anything, okay, but which is not completely true. But I was making some presentations at national conferences. This is Alicia Corral with the Professional Women's Council of Los Angeles. So I was attending various events already. When I returned to Austin to write my dissertation, I was fortunate to be hired by the Texas State Historical Association. They were revising for the second time, the Texas History Encyclopedia called the Handbook of Texas, first written in the 50s and then again 76, and then the late 80s. They said, let's do it again, let's revise, but this time let's really try to add Mexican-American history. So I was the first researcher, they called me a Hispanic Research Associate for that project, and that is where I wrote 80 articles for the Texas Encyclopedia, the Handbook of Texas. This is me at the office. You can see the old computer monitor. Also, when I was still a student, I was the first person to write the timeline of LULAC's history. Again, I'm not even a doctoral student. I mean, I don't even have my doctorate yet, but this is in 1990 as a graduate student. I wrote this history. And really, it touches upon a few things that are national, but mostly it's Texas focused, okay? There's a few things here and there. And now, as of 2024, last year, I was asked to revise and update this LULAC milestones, which I did, and you can find it on the LULAC website. And it's pages and pages because I have so much more information and knowledge. But again, for being a grad student, I'm just kind of getting started. This is very impressive. So I always tell students, you don't have to have a PhD to start publishing and presenting and being active. You do it today, and you build your resume and your experience as you go along. This is me at, and again, I want you also to pay attention to what the kind of sources that I'm showing you. Okay, so I've shown you some photographs, I've shown you timelines, text material, newspaper articles of my mother's that was from a newspaper, the local newspaper in Cuero. This is from a button. So this again, a button will give you historical information. So I was there in 1990. It documents that I was there. It documents that I was also in El Paso. Okay, so at some of these events, I have been able to see historic moments. For example, in El Paso in 1994, I believe, if I'm recalling correctly, was the election of the first woman president ever, national woman president in LULAC, Belén Robles from El Paso. So I was there. So I've kind of been like an ethnographer, taking down notes, making observations wherever I go. Now, the bulk of what historians and researchers mostly do is work in the archives. So if you, for example, have a body of papers, let's say you die tomorrow, okay, and you happen to have a bunch of papers on your desk, okay, so perhaps on your desk you have your birth certificate, you have your high school yearbook, you have a manuscript, a book that you were writing, et cetera, et cetera. If you die and somebody puts those materials into the library, they end up in these boxes. And these boxes have folders in there, and then they are labeled and organized. So this is me working in Corpus Christi with the papers of Jovita Gonzalez and Edmundo Mireles, who were active in LULAC in Corpus Christi. And again, the work of historians is really hard. We like it, but a lot of people cannot take it. Okay, I'm being honest. Can you sit there all day, let's say for 7 or 8 hours, and go through paper after paper? Most people can't take that. But we historians and archivists, nerdy folks that you are, especially that group over there, we love to do that. And we love to identify what's in them. And then you have to figure out, what can I use from this piece of paper? how can I put that into a story? And so over time, I did finish the dissertation way back in 1992. I worked on making it a book for a long, long time, and finally the book came out, No Mexicans, Women, or Dogs Allowed, The Rise of the Mexican-American Civil Rights Movement. And I am very proud to say that the phrase that we now use, Mexican-American Civil Rights Movement, was not used before my research. And now most of us know, in more recent times, we're familiar with what we call the Chicano movement, which you can date from the early or mid-60s up into the late 70s. The Chicano movement is more recent. But even before that, we did have an effort, a movement for Mexican descent, Mexican-American civil rights. And I consider that a movement. And so that's what the beginning of LULAC, and actually even its predecessor in the early 1920s, is initiating that movement. And that movement, and there's all kinds of various organizations before, after, and during, but that movement arrives here in Iowa in the 50s. Okay, so again, I was fortunate also to write a book, Adelas Los Vento. Adelas Los Vento is actually a name that LULACers should know. She wrote the first small biography of the founder of LULAC, Alonso Esperales. I was fortunate when I was a sophomore, I met Adelas Los Vento. She had papers. She says, come use my papers. They weren't in an archive. They weren't in the library. Come use them. She had a trunk full of materials. And so that's what I used, a lot of that for my senior honors thesis. And then later I went back. She had already died, but I said, you know what? She was an important writer. She used to write newspaper articles. She was active from South Texas, San Juan, and Edinburgh from 1927 all the way to 1990. She wrote numerous newspaper articles, op-eds, English and Spanish, especially in the Valley. She was deceased, but this was an important person, actually in U.S. history. She is a very important person. And then my most recent book was about the founder of LULAC, Alonso Perales. He died in 1960, but his papers did not get to the university archives till 2009. You see, about 60 years have gone by. And you know what? He was an attorney. He was a U.S. diplomat. He was the principal founder of LULAC. He had written several books. Hello, libraries, archives. Should we take some interest in this man? So you see the lack of attention to Latino archives. And even if he was middle class, English speaking, articulate, published, et cetera, he still was not considered important enough. And then the family also didn't want to let go of the material. So there's other factors involved. Okay, so this is what I do. This is at a state convention. I give public presentations. I try to promote the history of LULAC. And this is me in San Antonio. I love to speak to folks. If I can get 500 or 5,000, that's wonderful. If I can get 5 of you to listen, that's good enough. So here, this is with current day President Roman Palomares on the left, and also with an academic friend here. And this is right around the time of my appointment as National LULAC Historian. Okay, so let's move on now. Let's talk a little bit about Iowa. Okay, so how do I X out of this? Assistance, please. Let's see. Okay. Oh, here we go. Here we go. I found it. Okay. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about Iowa. Okay. I Googled images of Iowa, and this is what came up. Okay. So I am here in this desolate environment with previous farms that once existed. No people, very few people live here in Iowa, although I understand there's about 3 million of you here now. And there's a good number of you here in Iowa City. But anyway, so right now we have stereotypes about Iowa and we have stereotypes about LULAC. And so let's talk a little bit about some of those things and what do the archives tell us? How do we correct those stereotypes? And we can talk some more about some of that shortly. But anyway, again, LULAC is a national organization, and we'll talk about that. But again, we don't have a good general history of LULAC, of National LULAC, in my opinion. There's one or two books out there, but in my opinion, they're not good, and they do not fully utilize all the resources that are out there nowadays. How do I move this? Let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay, so a typical person, let's say they want to study they say, oh, I got to write a research paper on the history of LULAC in Iowa. So then they Google, okay? And this is what they're going to find, okay? And again, we know that ordinary, regular folks do not have the time, the resources, and the expertise to write a good, even brief history of an organization, whether it's local or statewide. So this is what you're going to see. And really, there's not enough meat here. And please excuse me, vegetarians, but there's not enough meat here for us to say, hey, this is really important what they have done here in Iowa. Okay, so a typical person, that's what they're going to do. They're going to Google. And that's the kind of thing they're going to find. Okay, but then we also have professionally trained historians. We have people like Dr. Janet Weaver, okay, who has written some great history essays, but mostly academics, people like me, will read that stuff. It's kind of thick. It's hard to find out about. Yet, she went beyond that, and she said, you know what? Hola, Iowa is an important Spanish language bilingual newspaper. Let me write some kind of general history. And she did that. Okay, so we have this, and this is on the internet. So this is an excellent history, brief history of LULAC in Iowa. Okay, and then she and also the Iowa Women's Archives, and perhaps, and I don't know all this history, again, initiated originally Mujeres Latinas Project, continuing commitment by this archive to do this kind of history. They create this beautiful exhibit and accompanied by a booklet about migration of peoples and Latinos, Latinx peoples into Iowa and what their experience has been here, particularly the Mexican descent community. So we need short articles that are in newspapers, on the internet. We need well-informed exhibits such as this one. We need short, quick information, but we also need thick and deep stuff that the historians and the academics, that's what we do. And here we have her again. She's still at it, okay? She is still at it, okay? And what I saw, again, I've only been here a day and a half, excellent photograph collection of Iowa LULAC. And there's even materials in there that are important from the national level. And I'll show you some of that. Okay, but again, we need more historians, we need writers, and we need quick information, easy to get to, short, but we also need the big, thick books that document stuff. This is how I know this. This is where the footnote that tells you I got this fact from this source, so somebody could go look at it later. Okay, so the little that we do know, and again, most of what I know right now is based on the work of Dr. Janet Weaver, is that the first person, to my knowledge at this point, that begins to think about the Midwest is Alfred Hernandez from Houston, who's an attorney. Okay, and he happened to have a brother-in-law who lived in Chicago by the name of J.B. Casas. That's the first contact. Hey, I got a brother-in-law in Chicago. Why don't we try to see if we can get them involved in LULAC? Okay, because by the, let's say the year's 1955, LULAC has been founded in Texas, 1929. is in New Mexico by around 1935, is in Colorado by around 1939, Arizona, I can't remember exactly, but it's in the fold. And California actually had a council in Sacramento in the early 30s, but then comes into the fold again in the 40s, okay? But they're Southwestern. And so now LULAC is thinking, well, what about the Midwest? What about other places? Okay, so luckily LULAC at that time has a president who actually becomes a millionaire that starts as a dishwasher and is from Mexico. Okay, and I think, as far as I know, when he's head of LULAC, he's still a Mexican national, even though the LULAC Constitution from the very beginning said this is only for citizens of the U.S. But rules can be bent a little bit. You know, somebody that's going to make important contributions, go ahead and let them in. So this is Tejerina. So he has money of his own to kind of help with some of the expansion. Okay, LULAC is always working on a shoestring. Okay, always working on a shoestring. Okay, the information we have is that it's Jesse Mosqueda from Des Moines is the first state director. They used to call them regional governors. And so he's starting to make connections. Hey, there's this organization out there called LULAC. And the other thing is that as early as 1931, LULAC established a newsletter, and this was a brilliant thing that they did. So almost monthly from 1931 on to the present, and it's shaky some years, but they had a newsletter that they could say, hey, this is what LULAC is, this is who LULAC is, see what we're doing. So it was a tool of communication and a way to recruit folks. So they had information about it. And again, remember that they're really, you know, radio is starting to be more important in 30s, 40s, et cetera. TV is not going to be big until, what, the 50s or so. But Latinos, we don't have access to that stuff. And we have, in some places, we might have a half-an-hour radio program in Spanish or bilingual, but we don't have a lot of that. So even communication is difficult. Okay, so this is the LULAC news in 1957. If you look closely, you can see that, yes, definitely the Southwest is there, and then very proudly they are showing, you know what, we've got folks in Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin. Okay, so they're already feeling that, hey, we're not just a Southwestern operation. Okay, so this map does not properly reflect. This is the one that the one I most recently found. It does not properly reflect where LULAC has been. Okay, but let me tell you that LULAC, as of today, has been in 47 different states. And it's been in Puerto Rico. It's still in Puerto Rico. It's been in Mexico, Japan, West Germany, and a few places in Africa. Okay, anybody can join LULAC, all right? Okay, but think about it. LULAC has not been in North Dakota, to my knowledge, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana. Those are the ones where it's too cold to be in LULAC, okay? I'm joking here. But anyway, so, but LULAC does not always sustain itself. Mostly it does not. Who can tell us why it doesn't sustain itself? Who can tell us? This is a teacher in me coming out. Myra? Myra, what do you think?
Well, I know that a lot of councils fell apart kind of after COVID just because no one was able to meet up in person.
Okay, but let's go way before. COVID's very recent. Okay, let's say the year is 1950. Okay, why would a LULAC chapter disband? Okay, let's think about everybody in organizations comes and goes from most organizations. Okay, beyond that, if you're in LULAC in 1950, is there extreme racism in the 1950s? Yes, do you get tired of fighting racism, classism, later sexism, et cetera, et cetera? Yes, there's burnout and there's lack of resources, monies, et cetera, et cetera. But that's exactly why Iowa is amazing, because Iowa has sustained itself. Again, councils come and go, even in Iowa, but Iowa has had a persistent presence since the 50s. Okay, so we were talking about how important archives are. So luckily, when I was using the LULAC archive in Austin, there is something called the Robert and Anna Vasquez papers from Indiana. Okay, and to my knowledge, it's one of the few Midwestern collections that is at this official repository. Okay, so this is Ann Vasquez. And what I have now surmised, because I've been doing, keeping lists, et cetera, she is the first woman state director in the Midwest, okay? All right, now her papers are in the library. Now this is a list. This is a list of the materials that are in her collection, okay? And if you were to look closely, and let me see if I can do this here or not. Okay, you're going to see, let's see, where do we see Iowa? Okay, here we see Iowa, 15th Annual LULAC Convention Program. Okay, so you see she kept all these programs, Indiana, Illinois, et cetera, various places, but there's only one or two from Iowa. So if I was in Austin and I said, hey, I've got to do a history of LULAC in the Midwest, well, I'm going to slide Iowa because there's only one or two documents. Okay, that's why the more documents we have, the more local councils, district, state, national materials, it gives us a broader picture. Okay, all right, let's see. Okay. So in that same collection, we have a listing of where LULAC is. You can see Arizona, California, Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, New Mexico, Texas, and Wisconsin. Okay? Okay, so by the late 50s, LULAC is in 9 states. And again, that same picture we saw, LULAC is pretty solid in the Southwest, and then also now it's in the Midwest. And the Midwest is still there today, folks. Okay, so this is the chronological order that they come into the league. And again, that Chicago contact was the first connection there, and then other connections. Okay, and then that same, one of the documents I found, this is the listing, at least of the initial LULAC councils. Okay, you will see that Des Moines has a men's council, a ladies LULAC, and junior LULAC. Des Moines, see, this is one of the things I'm trying to figure out, okay? Officially, ladies LULAC existed from 33 to the present, but as I mentioned, beginning in the 50s, we start to see more mixed councils, men and women. But apparently, for some reason, Davenport says, come on, women, we want you in, or the women said, hey, we want in, one or the other, whereas in Des Moines, that didn't happen, okay? They have a separate chapter of women, a separate chapter of men, okay? So I'm interested in that dynamic. Why? Okay? A junior LULAC also gets founded in the late 30s, and the idea is youth empowerment, and to create a bridge from young people. Initially, it's like kids under 18, and then it becomes older. And then in the 50s also, they create the collegiate councils for college folks. Okay, here we have a picture, and this is here in your archive of the Fort Madison LULAC. And again, you can see this is a mixed council with men and women. Okay, and again, the women's archives here, because they got this material a few years back, they have been able to identify who these people are, because as more people, as time goes on, and older photos, you can't identify them. Nobody knows who they are anymore. Okay, so we always want to identify photos. Today we have the phone. It's a big problem. How do we identify photos? We have to have hard copies. Okay, over time, the flash drive, the thumb drive becomes a problem. The phone photos become a problem. We need hard copy photos labeled and dated. Okay, here's another one from their collection of Davenport, 1958. Okay, Henry Vargas, whose collection they have, Henry and, is it Lucy, his wife's name, Lucy? They're both involved in Davenport. And then they also created a local Davenport newsletter called El Reportero that you can see in the old days. They mimeograph things. Okay, there used to be an old machine with purple mess ink. Okay, I was using those. I remember using those up until around 1980. We were still using those. Okay, we also have, excuse that, the A is in a bad location here, but Ayla Plasencia from Des Moines, she is the first president of Ladies LULAC there, and she's the first woman state director from Iowa in 1986. So one of the things that I'm trying to figure out is, were there women state directors before the 70s? And actually there were. And in Texas, we used to think that the first woman state director was Dolores Guerrero from Beaumont in Houston around 1970. But looking at broader papers, I have now discovered, you know what, there were a few places where there were women state directors outside of Texas. In other words, the most machismo is in Texas, okay? It's true, it's true. Okay, also from the Midwest and from Iowa, Susana Pavon is also the first woman to hold the position of district director. A district is like the locals, and then in the immediate region, there's various LULAC chapters. You call that a district. She's the first one in the whole country because most of the district directors are men, okay? She's also, beginning in the late 30s, LULAC creates a national position for women, and they call it Second Vice President General. So every year from the late 30s all the way to 1970, this is a position for women. And here we have somebody from Iowa that's holding that position, which is very high at the national level in 1958. Okay, so here we have a photo also from this archive, and I believe that this is the 1959 National LULAC Convention, which was in Chicago. Okay, and here we have Alfred Hernandez, Francis Ramirez, who is the president, Susana Pavon, and Oscar Larel, who I believe is either a previous national president at the time. Okay, and then in one of the LULAC news, we find an essay written by Susana Pavon because it is the, 25th anniversary of LULAC in 1954. And she says, the distinctive thing about LULAC women, those I have known during the short time that we of the Midwest have been in LULAC, is that they are always interested in people. This liking for and concern about people has had a tremendous part in producing the unique philosophy that we have in LULAC. Okay, another major Midwest organizer was a fellow named Val Hernandez. I'm not quite sure at this point where he's from, but he died, probably maybe around 1960 or so. But he was very much respected in LULAC circles, somebody who was organizing throughout the Midwest. Again, this is one of the photos that we have. This is this, which city is this one in? Davenport. Okay, so this is a convention that they're having. Also, here we see Henry Vargas, and I believe that's Susana Pavon at the very end. I'm not sure who the middle man is there. One of the things I'm looking at right now is I'm trying to write, or I am writing, a history of women in the LULAC organization. I'm finishing that manuscript before the end of this year. I'm looking at the kinds of activities that LULAC or Ladies LULAC were involved in. Queen contests seem to have been very big as a fundraising opportunity, and so I'm looking at that, and here we have a full court with Isla Placencia at the very end. Also the work from Dr. Weaver. She has written an excellent article that talks about LULAC's involvement with migrant workers and great boycotts. Again, there's a lot of things to write about. This is one of the programs that is in the Ann Vasquez collection. And here's some things inside of it. So we have here a picture of people who received scholarships in 1971. These people, the idea was you needed educated people in order to solve the problems of our community. And we needed a more extensive middle class. We needed people who knew how to do white-collar things to solve problems. And again, various queens. I show you real quickly a picture of a clubhouse in Houston. One thing I'm talking about in my book manuscript is that in some places they created LULAC halls. Some of them were exclusively for men, but in other places they were very communal, included women from the beginning. Houston excluded women in the beginning. Okay, and then I understand here in Davenport, you folks have a LULAC center. Very, very important. There's not that many permanent LULAC halls and centers throughout the entire USA. Okay, even San Antonio, where most of LULAC started, there's no LULAC hall. There's no LULAC building or center. Okay, so Iowa, definitely take pride in your buildings as places to have fundraisers, to have community and cultural events. Very important accomplishment on your part. There was in 1988 a website called Mapping Social Movements in the U.S. This is the places they said Iowa had LULAC councils in 1988. And then the current LULAC website includes a list of all those that you have here today. And see, my reading of something on the website, 600 members of LULAC in Iowa. Impressive, impressive. Okay, and I understand that Davenport has 200 members. Impressive. So I am so impressed with Iowa LULAC. And I'll tell you what we need, and I'll say this almost in closing. Real quick, here's a picture of Belén Robles, the first national president. This is an example of a very important photo that has national significance. Belén Robles being an advocate for women's rights since the early 60s, becoming national president in 1994. Lucy Acosta, also very important. But I want to say that we don't have enough historians, period. Okay, well, there's a lot of historians of all ethnicities and backgrounds in the U.S., probably 15,000, maybe more. Okay, Latino historians, I bet we have 200, 300. And Mexican-American women historians like myself, there's about 120 of us. Okay, so we need more historians. We need people to do that deep research to get in there. But again, we also need quick information available on the internet. We need quick TikToks. We need quick timelines, quick listings. We need all of that. So I want to thank the various institutions which have allowed me to share some of their photos and materials. And I want to thank all of you for being here today. I want to thank American Studies. I want to thank the Iowa Archives, the Iowa Library, Dr. Weaver, Dr. Fernandez, Dr. Rocha. And I will end there and take questions. And I want to say also, never forget your shield. Your shield is what will protect you, and that is the LULAC organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Orozco. So we're going to open it up for questions. Just raise your hand, and I need to pass the mic so it will capture the sound. Don't be shy. Do you guys have any questions? Go ahead.
So thank you so much for your presentation. Earlier you mentioned the rule of a policy that you had to be a citizen to be a member of LULAC. And my question is regarding those types of policies as well as the mission statement. Have they been updated throughout the years?
Yes, yes. If you look at the No Mexicans book that I wrote, it includes the original 1929 aims and objectives. Those were first revised in 1940, and they have been revised several times again. But if you look at the 1929 document, you really get a sense for what LULAC was supposed to be and meant to be. But regardless of the changing language, we're still talking about political empowerment, more Latino elected officials, electing people who will pay attention to Latinx interests, economic empowerment, whether it's home ownership, better employment, equal wages, et cetera, representation in the media, cultural representation. It's still the same issues almost 100 years later. And obviously we've had so much progress, and LULAC is responsible for so much of that progress. Let me address the question of citizenship. Sometimes people think, okay, well, why did LULAC discriminate against Mexican immigrants when it was founded? And really, we have to think about the times in the 1920s. The Border Patrol had just gotten created in 1924. And what LULAC was saying is that we need to assert our U.S. citizenship as part of the rationale for our rights. Because you could have said, well, we have human rights. Well, the people in power who were tinged with racism could care less. Okay, so that's the idea. Use citizenship as a way to argue for our rights here in the United States. Also, in that time period, we're just getting to the end of the Mexican Revolution, and there were still, especially in Texas, there were still a lot of middle class and intellectual Mexicans who were still saying, oh, well, you know, what about, they didn't know what they were going to do. Some of them were going to go back to Mexico, or some whatever. But bottom line, if LULAC had not made that decision, I believe it was possible that the leadership could have been deported. And then especially in the 1930s, we had a major deportation and repatriation drives in the 30s. Okay, but as of 1986, I believe, that reference to citizenship has been taken out. Another question or comment? Yes.
Okay, well, I know here at the University of Iowa, we just started the Collegiate Council just over a year ago, haven't we? And I guess my question is, since as a historian, what collegiate councils have you seen throughout the U.S. that have been the most active, and what is it about them that like have progressed LULAC in general? And I guess what have been some major, what's the right word I'm looking for? Major contributions that they've given.
Okay, I don't know how to answer that question, okay, because I don't know enough about the collegiate councils. I can say that the first council was created at the University of Texas at Austin in the 50s. At that time, they were working on poll tax drives because that was, in Texas, you still had to pay in order to vote. That was common in the southern states up until the Civil Rights Bill of the mid-60s or so. So if you're trying to get ideas, I would simply network with those other collegiate councils. But I would say, you know what, in my thinking, the role of a collegiate council at the university is to work on getting more Latinx students into the pipeline. In some places, undocumented students are not being able to receive tuition anymore. That's true in Texas. We need Latino, Latinx studies, more courses. We need more professors. And we need the students to connect with the local community. What can you do if you have time, because it's hard to be a student, but how can you connect with the local community to uplift? We need to uplift and bring people with us. As we're uplifting, as we climb, we need to bring people with us. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the talk overall. And you mentioned before that you really want to see councils continue to print photographs, print documents, record. What are good practices for councils in Iowa to start collecting their documents, collecting their photographs, and how do we connect those dots to connect back to national and back to Iowa?
Okay, that's a very good question. And in the near future, this will probably be one of the Zoom presentations that I'm going to make, because just like the national caucus, what do you call the caucus where all the presidential candidates come to Iowa?
Oh, it's a caucus.
The caucus, okay, that's the first one. First place is here in Iowa, in the old days, right?
For one party.
Okay, for one party. Okay, well, likewise, this is my first caucus as National LULAC Historian. This is my first public presentation. And so what we'd like to do down the line is to have a seminar or Zoom where we talk about how do you collect materials, how do you connect to your archive. Okay, and here's the thing is that we need to collect materials, we need to identify them, take care of them, and put them in professional archives, such as for Iowa, this is a great place. Okay, but we don't want to put them in any little bitty library that doesn't have professional capabilities to do that. Okay, but in some places they have history harvest projects, which means, like, you could say on Saturday, if you have photographs, bring them. A university usually will work with you. Bring them on Saturday, we'll scan them, and then we'll put them in the archives. Okay, so there is the ability that, you know, it's not just one entity, that you can have multiple photographs now. But again, down the line, we're going to work on that. You know, how do we begin to prepare for the 100th anniversary of LULAC? Okay, and Iowa, again, you already have a major foundation with your archive here. Okay, and again, from what I know thus far, you probably have the second best collection here. Okay, but you need historians, you need researchers, you need people who know how to do research, who can look through materials, make timelines, short materials, et cetera, et cetera. We need the thick academic, and we need the short and quick for the public. Okay, another question or comment?
This is more a comment than a question. When we started the Mujeres Latinas project at the Iowa Women's Archives in the early 2000s, we envisioned it as an oral history project because we just didn't know if there would be many documents out there, what there would be. But as a result of doing some of the documents, especially the ones in Davenport, Janet especially got involved with Council 10, and people in Council 10 had this sense of their history. So Ernest Rodriguez, I think in particular, had saved a lot of old records and that sort of thing. And so we climbed up in the attic, I think. We didn't climb up and got some of those materials, but it really helps to have those connections between the archives and the councils, and to find those people in the councils who really are cognizant of their history
Yes, yes. And I should also say that in the country, again, at the national level, Houston Council 60 has an excellent local LULAC history collection, but that's only because we had a historian and archivist named Dr. Tom Krennic, who in the mid-'80s said, I'm going to go get LULAC materials. But that hasn't happened in other places. Okay, so LULAC in other places will be asking, okay, Indiana, get some LULAC Indiana materials, and you deposit them either at your major archive there or you send them to UT Austin. And it doesn't matter. I'll go wherever they're at, okay? As long as you folks in Iowa give me corn, I'll be here, okay?
So we owe a great debt of gratitude to Council 10 and all the support we've had over the years.
Yes.
And Mike especially.
Okay, and again, Iowa is set up for somebody to come in and write a history of LULAC in Iowa. The materials are there, and I can't say that for most states. I cannot say that for most states. But again, just because you have materials in the library doesn't mean you have the historians. We don't have a lot of historians that are doing, and again, Dr. Weaver, she's not Latina, right? You're not Latina? Okay, anyone can do this history, but she is well-grounded in Latinx studies. So she wrote excellent research. You know, what we need more historians or short projects. We need those. So again, the collegiate folks, hey, maybe you folks can be part of that bridge. You know, what's out there? And you know what? In doing this, we're going to totally destroy so many stereotypes. And because people would think, oh, well, there's nothing in Iowa, okay? People would say, in Texas, they would say, oh, LULAC didn't have Iowa, okay? Mexican-American women, they didn't do anything. All they did was submit to husbands through ladies' auxiliaries. And they didn't have any intellect. They didn't do anything. All they did was make tamales. Okay, so in writing this history of LULAC, we are getting rid of those stereotypes and a lot of racist and sexist and even homophobic tropes that are out there, narratives that are out there. And right now is a very serious time in U.S. history. And this is why we have to assert this history, okay? And I want to go ahead and end this gathering today by reminding everybody that here in Iowa, what your flag here says, our liberties we prize and our rights we will maintain. Thank you. And thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. I know folks are busy. Thank you for coming.